لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وفقهنا إذا جهلنا وزدنا علما نافعا وعملا متقبلا يا كريم اللهم انفعنا بالقرآن العظيم واجعله لنا إماما ونورا وهدى ورحمة يا أرحم الراحمين وبعد. Today inshallah we will come on to Surah Al-An'am, Surah Al-An'am that we haven't touched for the last couple of days. We'll come to that today and continue looking at some of the meanings of some of the verses, Surah Al-An'am. But first we'll continue looking at a hadith, the statements of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam that encourage the reading of the Quran and that gives a motivation and a yearning to become from Ashab al-Quran, from the people of Quran, who as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, they are the people of Allah and His special ones. Ahlul Quran, Ahlullahi wa khassatuh. The people of the Quran are the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His special ones. The last hadith that we read yesterday was quite a detailed hadith that wasn't just focused around the Quran. It spoke about many other virtuous deeds, particularly about helping and aiding and assisting another person who's in difficulty and is in distress. But to come back to the central point within the hadith and to shed more light upon this, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, وَمَا اجْتَمَعَ قَوْمٌ فِي بَيْتٍ مِّن بُيُوتِ اللَّهِ يتلون كتاب الله ويتدارسونه بينهم إلا نزلت عليهم السكينة وغشيتهم الرحمة وحفتهم الملائكة وذكرهم الله في من عنده. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned that there's never a group of people who come together in a house of God, in a masjid, in a house of God, in a masjid. Although, as we mentioned, there are some narrations that broaden it and do not limit it to coming together in a masjid, who recite the book of Allah and study it between themselves. Except that four things happens: a sakina, or peace and tranquility descends upon them. They're surrounded by mercy, they're encircled by angels, and the most important of the four is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions him with those with him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions him with the angels that are present with him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Shaykh Abdullah Sarajidi rahimahullah ta'ala, he confirms the point, which is that hadith tells us that one of the most blessed and virtuous acts that a person or that a group of people can do is to come together and sit down together and read the Quran and to do other types of dhikr. So sit together, reading the Quran, and to come together and mention Allah and His Messenger. So although there are some who will perhaps condemn this and say that it's not from the Sunnah that people gather together and read Quran and do dhikr and so on, it's explicitly stated by the Messenger, particularly reciting the Quran, but even other forms of dhikr, specifically stated by the Messenger, the encouragement and the recommendation of people gathering together in the house of God and reading the Quran and studying it amongst themselves. So this is an encouragement that people should get into the habit of sitting together as a group reciting the Quran, sitting together as a group reciting the Quran, sitting together as a group reflecting over the Quran, and reflecting over Allah and His Messenger. And this is confirmed by the statement of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhum. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhum was asked the question, Ayyul amali afdal? Which is the most virtuous of deeds? Ayyul amali afdal? Which is the most virtuous of deeds? Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhum said, Dhikrullahi ta'ala. Dhikrullahi ta'ala. To remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, although again, Dhikrullahi ta'ala is aam, it covers any type of remembrance of God, but then the explanation that he gives is more particular about the Quran. وَمَا جَلَسَ قَوْمٌ فِي بَيْتٍ مِّن بُيُوتِ اللَّهِ يَتَعَاطَوْنَ فِيهِ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ فِيمَا بَيْنَهُمْ وَيَتَدَارَسُونَهُ إِلَّا أَظَلَّتْهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ بِأَجْنِحَتِهَا وَكَانُوا أَضْيَافَ اللَّهِ مَا دَامُوا عَلَى ذَلِكَ حتى يخوضوا في حديث غيره. So then Abdullah ibn Abbas continues to explain the most virtuous and blessed of all acts. He then said, there's never a group of people who gather together and sit in a house of God, reciting the book of Allah between them and studying it between them, except أظلتهم الملائكة بأجنحتها. Angels will shade them with their wings. Angels will shade them with their wings, and they are the guests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as long as they stay there. Angels will shade them with their wings, and they are the guests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as long as they stay there, until they engage in some of the conversation. Until they engage in some of the conversation. So here Ibn Abbas gives us some additional terms which confirm the original points. In the words of the Prophet, حَفَّتْهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ, angels encircle them all the way up to the throne of God Almighty, those reciting the Quran. But more particularly here, Ibn Abbas, he says, angels will shade them with their wings. And the additional point that he describes, وَكَانُوا أَضْيَافَ اللَّهِ, and they are ضُيُوفَ Allah, they are the guests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the house of God, performing one of the most beloved acts of worship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you sat in the masjid reading the Quran, perhaps a better thing is to get somebody else to read it with you. Perhaps, because that's more in line with the words of the Prophet. It's a blessed thing to sit alone and read the Quran. What's more in line with the advice of the Prophet, if you sat in the masjid, have one or two other people sit with you. Have one or two other people sit with you and recite the Quran. Recite the Quran together. Reciting it by yourself is blessed. But Wallahu A'lam, in all of the narration that speak about sakina, like tranquility descending, and mercy, and angels, and God Almighty mention them with him, none of them mention that person reading the Quran by himself in the masjid. None of them speak about that person. It's always about a group of people come together. It's always about a group of people reading together. None of those narrations speak about one person sat by himself beside the masjid and reading the Quran by himself. Although there's so much khair within that, although there's so much goodness within that. But this particular reward is about people sitting together and reading the Quran together. And Ibn Malik, then he gives us a bit more detail. When's the best time to read the Quran together? And what was the practice of the Prophet with his companions? He said after Fajr. After Fajr. The best time to do this is after Fajr. Anas ibn Malik said, كانوا إذا صلوا الغداة قعدوا حلقا حلقا يقرؤون القرآن ويتعلمون الفرائض والسنن ويذكرون الله تعالى. Sayyidina Anas ibn Malik, he said, when they, the companions with the Prophet had finished praying Fajr, when they'd finished praying Fajr, they would sit in circles. They would sit in groups together, reciting the Quran. So that's the asl of it. Not only was the Prophet telling them that any group of people sit down together and read the Quran, you'll get all of this, but the Prophet himself is actually doing that with his companions. What were they doing in the masjid after Fajr? They were sitting in groups reciting the Quran. And they were sitting in groups, يَتَعَلَّمُونَ الْفَرَائِض, learning the obligation, learning sunnahs, and doing dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the time after Fajr in the masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam present there, they'd be reading Quran, they'd be studying knowledge, they'd be doing dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, he pinpointed this time, specifically about Fajr. مَا مِنْ قَوْمٍ صَلَّوْا صَلَاةَ الْغَدَاةِ ثم قعدوا في مصلاهم يتعاطون كتاب الله ويتدارسونه إلا وكل الله تعالى بهم الملائكة يستغفرون لهم حتى يخوضوا في حديث غيره. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, he said, there's never a group of people who pray Fajr, and then they sit at the places where they prayed, reading the Quran together and studying the Quran, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will appoint or will assign angels to them. And those angels will be asking forgiveness for them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will assign to them angels, and those angels will be asking forgiveness for them حتى يخوضوا في حديث غيره, until they start engaging in some other conversation. And that's the habit and that's the practice across the Muslim lands, even up to now. Even up to now. Like up until when we were studying in Damascus, you hardly found classes of knowledge taking place immediately after Fajr. The first thing, the priority was reading Quran, and then you started having the classes of knowledge taking place. But across the masajid of Sham, you would always have people, teachers teaching Quran, and people reading Quran together after Fajr. And the most important one in Jami' al-Umawi, the great mosque, the Umayyad mosque, from the time of Sayyidina Abu Darda, who brought these gatherings of Quran into Damascus, even up until now, you still have those halaq al-Quran, you have those gatherings of Quran still taking place there. So if people want to push themselves and break the nafs, once you prayed your Fajr in Jama'ah, stay there and recite Quran. Stay there and recite Quran. And for the women folk, for whom it's not from the Sunnah to pray in the masjid, they're not deprived of the reward. They're not. So they read the Quran or they pray whatever they pray, and then read the Quran. They're not deprived of that reward. They'll receive the same reward with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala for doing that act by themselves. Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin, he then speaks about, after speaking about circles of Quran, which is amongst the best of all actions for people to do, sitting together reading the Quran. He then speaks about the honor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed this nation with, which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed this ummah to memorize the Quran. Allowed this ummah to memorize the Quran. And the honor within that is perhaps twofold. First, preservation of scriptures that came before was never through memorization. You don't have people who memorize the Old Testament or the Psalms or the New Testament. You don't have people who memorize the whole of the Gospels, for example. You have people from Christian and Jewish backgrounds who are familiar with them, and particularly the more devout. But as we mentioned before, a child in this ummah learns the Quran. Go to the most scholarly and learned Christian or Jew, they wouldn't have memorized the Old or New Testaments. But a child has memorized, children memorize the Quran. It was never a duty, nor did Allah reveal it in a manner which aided and facilitated memorization of previous scriptures. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ. The Quran itself says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we've made the Quran easy to memorize. We've made the Quran easy to memorize. That was not the case in previous scriptures. That was not the case with the Old Testament, the Psalms and the New Testament and the scrolls of Ibrahim and the other scrolls that were sent. Allah never revealed them to be memorized. He never revealed them to be memorized. But with this ummah, with this nation, with this community, it's memorized. And it's part of the honor and the greatness of this nation that we're able to memorize the Quran. That's the first aspect, is that it was never intended that previous scriptures be memorized. But the Quran, it's intended that it be memorized. And then the second point is that the reason, one of the key, perhaps the key reason for the memorization of the Quran is the preservation of the Quran. Why was it that previous nations, they did not have the responsibility to memorize? Because alterations were going to enter into it. Alterations, changes due to human error were going to creep into it. And with those alterations and changes, other prophets came and brought them back to the truth. Because of that constant stream of prophets that came, hundreds of thousands of prophets, when errors crept into revelation, God Almighty sent another prophet to bring people back. So there was never the dire need to preserve the revelation from error. Whereas with the Quran, because the Quran is to remain until the last days of humanity with no prophet to come after, then it has to remain intact in the original form. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala selected the method as being memorization. وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ إِنَّا نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. We're the one who revealed this revelation, and we're the ones who preserved it. The preservation of the Quran is through the memorization of the Quran, and the memorization is there so that up until the last days of humanity, every believer as well as unbeliever is able to access that revelation from God Almighty, because la nabiyya ba'di, because there is no prophet to come. That's the secret to memorization of the Quran, preservation of the message until the last days of humanity. And the preservation of the Quran is not in the masahif. It's not the books that are there. That's not the preservation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says, بَلْ هُوَ آيَاتٌ بَيِّنَاتٌ فِي صُدُورِ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ. In fact, these are clear verses that are carried within the hearts of those who've been given knowledge. في صدور الذين أوتوا العلم. In the hearts of those who've been given that knowledge. Those who've been given the Quran, they don't carry it in the mushaf, they carry it in their hearts. So wherever they are, whenever they are, whoever they are, they're able to recite it at ease. And that's, again, something we touched upon. What's your motivation in memorizing the Quran? What's your motivation in memorizing the Quran? It's not to have the title, Hafiz al-Quran. It's so wherever you are and whenever you're able to read the Quran and engage with the Quran. And that's why, as a starting point for those who want to memorize the Quran, as a starting point, where should you start? Surah Yasin and Surah Al-Mulk. Surah Yasin and Surah Al-Mulk. And why particularly those? The obvious reason, because they need to be read daily. Surah Yasin should be read every morning. Surah Al-Mulk should be read every single night. But more particularly, because the Prophet wanted that. He wanted that. He wanted, Allahu Alam, the only two surahs where the Prophet said, I wish for it to be in the heart of every single one of my nation, is in Surah Yasin and Surah Al-Mulk. The only two surahs where the Prophet said that. The Prophet he said about Surah Yasin, the well-known statement, that everything has a heart and the heart of the Quran is Yasin. Everything has a heart and the heart of the Quran is Yasin. And because the heart of the Quran is Yasin, just to diverge slightly, we spoke, I think, a few days back about how the Quran, it's the polisher of the heart. It cleanses the rust that builds on the heart. When you're feeling really down, and usually for a believer, that's the effect of sin. That's the effect of sin. But when you're feeling really down, or you feel like you've really done something wrong, you want to really clean your heart and go to the heart of the Quran. You want to really clean your heart, go to the heart of the Quran. Any part of the Quran, the whole of the Quran is a polisher and a cleanser. But when you feel that you've really done something wrong in front of Allah and you want to make tawbah, you want to repent, so you pray, you make dua, you do wudu, you give sadaqah, read Surah Yasin. Read Surah Yasin. The polisher of the heart is the Quran, and the heart of the Quran is what polishes the heart of the believer. The heart of the Quran is what polishes the heart of the believer. But the Prophet wanted that in the heart of every single believer. So the beginning point, the first thing you want to memorize after you've memorized, like the small surahs that you memorize, Surah Yasin, Surah Al-Mulk. That should be every single believer. And there you have an example of the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Harisun alaykum. Harisun alaykum. That the Prophet is more concerned for you and I than we are for our own selves. Harisun alaykum, the one who's concerned for you. He's concerned for you and I, that he wants to ensure that we're reading Surah Yasin and Surah Mulk every day. Surah Yasin and Surah Mulk. We heard that, we carry on as normal and say, MashaAllah, he was an amazing prophet, but we don't learn it. And MashaAllah, what an amazing person. But that's it, we carry on as we are. He's more concerned for our well-being than we are for our own well-being. He wants us to learn Yasin so that we have the heart of the Quran within our hearts. He wants us to read Surah Al-Mulk so that every single night, you don't need to be in wudu. You don't need to have the mushaf open in front of you, because the mushaf is there. The mushaf is carried in the hearts. The mushaf is in the hearts of the believers. So the commitment should be first Surah Yasin and Surah Mulk. Learn Surah Yasin, learn Surah Mulk. Once you've got that, then you start moving through the commonly recited surahs like Surah Alif Lam Mim Sajda, Surah Rahman, Surah Waqi'ah, the common surah, and then you make a commitment to learning larger portions of the Quran. With the Quran, the honor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us is that He's made our relationship with Him through His book easy. Easy. Why? Because He's made the Quran, memorization of the Quran, easy. The honor of this ummah is that the Quran is carried within the hearts of this ummah. And this is stated by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the mushaf is, before it's the book, it's the heart of the believer. The mushaf, before it's the the books, the mushaf is qalb al-mu'min. The mushaf in reality is the heart of the believer, and the honor to the believer, like something as weighty as the words of God, something as weighty as the word of God, where you cannot even touch it unless you're pure. You cannot touch the Quran unless you're pure. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala etched it into the hearts of the believers. He's etched it into the hearts of the believers and written it into the hearts of the believers. If in those books somebody was to change and alter, you wouldn't pick up on it. You wouldn't pick up on it. Maybe the short surahs, yes, but you wouldn't pick up on it. If somebody came and wanted to start changing the Quran, they could change the books, but they couldn't change what's in the hearts. Because once it's etched into the hearts, and you have like over 1 million people hafad al-Quran, the estimation around this time now, I think there's statistics that were done that there's roughly about 1 million hafad al-Quran at the moment. You can't change that collective memorization. You can change the books, but you can't change what's carried within the hearts, what's carried within the hearts of the believers. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored the belief that something as weighty as the Quran, He's allowed it to be etched into the hearts of the believers, and that's where it's preserved. It's not preserved there, it's preserved inside the hearts of the believers. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, narration mentions about the night of the Mi'raj. لما فرغت مما أمرني الله به من أمر السماوات والأرض قلت يا رب إنه لم يكن نبي قبلي إلا وقد أكرمته. The Prophet ﷺ says that when I'd finished everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered me to do in terms of heavens and the earth on the night of the Mi'raj, when it was all over, the Prophet ﷺ said, then I spoke to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I said, my Lord, there's never been a prophet before me except that you've honored him. جعلت إبراهيم خليلا وموسى كليما وسخرت لداود الجبال ولسليمان الريح والشياطين وأحييت لعيسى الموتى فما جعلت لي. The Prophet ﷺ said, every prophet before me, you've honored him. You made Ibrahim your Khalil. You made Ibrahim your Khalil. Khalil is the intimate, close friend. You made Ibrahim your Khalil. وموسى كليما, أي كلمت موسى. You spoke directly to Musa. وسخرت لداود الجبال, and you subjugated the mountains to Dawood alayhi salam. And you gave control of the mountains to Dawood alayhi salam, and you gave control to the winds and the devils to Sulaiman alayhi salam. And وأحييت لعيسى الموتى, and for Isa alayhi salam, you brought back the dead, you brought them back to life. So you've honored all of those prophets. فما جعلت لي, what's there for me? What's there for me? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, أوليس قد أعطيتك أفضل من ذلك كله. Have I not given you something better than all of that? Have I not given you something better than all of that? Number one, إني لا أذكر إلا ذكرت معي. I am never mentioned except that you are mentioned with me. I am never mentioned except that you are mentioned with me. And that statement, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he said that's the explanation of وَرَفَعْنَا لَكَ ذِكْرَكَ. وَرَفَعْنَا لَكَ ذِكْرَكَ. We have raised your remembrance. Ibn Abbas, he explained that كُلَّمَا ذُكِرْتُ ذُكِرْتَ مَعِي. Whenever I am mentioned, you are mentioned with me. Which is what? لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. A kafir who wants to become Muslim cannot just say لا إله إلا الله. He cannot just say لا إله إلا الله. He has to finish it off with Muhammad Rasulullah. If a non-Muslim comes and says La ilaha illallah and believes there's no God except for Allah, but he's not willing to testify about the messenger, he's still not a Muslim. The two have to be together. So that's the meaning of La udhkar illa dhukirta ma'i. I am not mentioned except that you are mentioned with me. And then the second, وَجَعَلْتُ صُدُورَ أُمَّتِكَ أَنَاجِيلَ يَقْرَؤُونَ الْقُرْآنَ ظَاهِرًا. And I've made the hearts of your nation, your people, anajil, a masahif, carriers of the Quran. I've made the hearts of your people carriers of the Quran, يقرؤون القرآن ظاهرا, where they can easily and openly read the Quran. Easily reading the Quran. You can be sat there lying against the wall, reading the Quran. You can be laying in bed, reading the Quran. You can be driving, reading the Quran. Whatever you're doing, reading the Quran. يَقْرَؤُونَ الْقُرْآنَ ظَاهِرًا. And I never gave this to any nation before. I never gave this to any nation before. And then the third thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, وَأَعْطَيْتُكَ كَنْزًا مِّن كُنُوزِ عَرْشِي لَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ الْعَلِيِّ الْعَظِيمِ. And I have given you a treasure from the treasures beneath my, from the treasures of the throne. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Three things that the Prophet has sold that I've given you preference over all of the other prophets through. One, whenever I mention, you'll mention with me. Two, the hearts of your nations are carriers of the revelation. The hearts of your nation are carriers of the revelation. Three, that from beneath the throne I reveal to your nation لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. And the honor of Hifz al-Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He honors every single person in this ummah, because every single, there's probably nobody in this ummah who doesn't know Al-Fatiha. Every single person, perhaps one or two, a tiny minority in this ummah of almost 2 billion, everybody knows the 7 verses of Quran. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Everybody knows Bismillah Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the ayahs of Quran. So everybody in this ummah has a part of the Quran within them. Everybody in this ummah has something of the Quran within them. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he said, why we've already mentioned preservation. Why did Allah choose the hearts of this ummah, of this nation, to be the carriers of His revelation? Preservation, but also protection. Preservation for the revelation, protection for the carrier. Protection for the carrier. Once Allah places the Quran in your heart and He doesn't take it out, you now become protected by the Quran. And that's why the people in the Quran, they always mention this point, that you're not half of the Quran, you're mahfuz bil Quran. You're the carrier of the Quran, you preserve the Quran, but by that you're protected by the Quran. Because hafiz, one of the hifz, doesn't just mean memorization, also means to guard, it means to preserve, it means to protect. It means to protect. So just as you preserve and carry the Quran, you then become protected by the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala selected the hearts of this ummah to carry and preserve the Quran, thereby they become protected by the Quran. And that's confirmed with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, اقرأوا القرآن فإن الله تعالى لا يعذب قلبا وعى القرآن. Recite the Quran, because Allah subhanahu will not punish a heart that carries the Quran. Allah subhanahu will not punish a heart that carries the Quran. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also said, لو كان القرآن في إهاب ما أكلته النار. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, had the Quran, or if the Quran, or had the Quran, or whenever the Quran is within a container, and ihab, the word ihab in Arabic means a leather skin, a leather pouch, a leather carrier. Had the Quran, or when the Quran is within a container, ما أكلته النار. Fire cannot consume. Fire cannot consume it. The Quran, whatever it is, will not be burnt. Will not be burnt if it's carried inside the heart. You can burn the page. You can burn the page. Sayyidina Uthman, Harraq al-Masahib, and all of those personal copies that the Sahaba carried of the Quran, he destroyed them. He destroyed them because they weren't written in the presence of the Messenger of God. So he eliminated all of them. How did he do? He burnt them. He burnt them. And back then, as well as now, people criticize Sayyidina Uthman. Sayyidina Uthman, he gathered together all of the copies of the Quran that Sahaba had written themselves. Sayyidina Aisha, Ubay ibn Ka'ab, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and other companions, Sayyidina Ali, other companions. Many of them had their own personal copies that they wrote themselves, but not written in the presence of the Messenger. He eliminates all of them. He eliminates all of them. The only ones that remain, the scrolls of Abu Bakr, were those copies that were written in the presence of the Messenger of God. That's the only ones that remain. And all of the copies of Quran that we have trace back to the copies that were written in the presence of the Messenger of God. Sayyidina Uthman, he burns them. Harraq al-Masahif. And that's what, in those time, people criticize Sayyidina Uthman, calling him the burner of the Quran. The burner of the Quran. Sayyidina Ali stands in front of them all and he says, you call him the burner of the Quran? Well, two narrations mentioned from Sayyidina Ali. One of them says, he said he only did that with the agreement of all of us. All the companions agreed that you have to eliminate the written copies that were not written in the presence of the Messenger of God. The other narration from Sayyidina Ali, he said, you call him the one who burns the Qur'ans. He said, had I been in his place, I would have done exactly the same. Sayyidina Ali said, had I been in his place, I would have done exactly the same. So the pages of the Quran can be burnt. The pages of the Quran can be burnt. And that's important in understand the statements of the Prophet لو كان القرآن في إهاب ما أكلته النار. If the Quran is within a container, a leather container, well, the container here in reality means the heart of the believer. Fire will never consume it. It's not talking about the book, it's talking about the heart of the believer. Once the Quran comes into the heart of the believer and becomes like a leather pouch, his heart becomes like a leather pouch that carries within it, مَا أَكَلَتْهُ النَّارُ. The fire will not consume that. The fire will not consume. That's not speaking about the books, it's speaking about the hearts of the believers. The Prophet ﷺ further said, now that you have the Quran in your heart, part of the Quran or the whole of the Quran, من أعطاه الله تعالى حفظ كتابه فظن أن أحدا أعطي أفضل مما أعطي فقد غلط وفي رواية فقد صغر أعظم النعم. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives memorization of his book, whoever Allah allows to memorize his book, and then that person thinks that somebody else has been given something better than him. One narration, the Prophet ﷺ said he's wrong. He's wrong. The other narration, the Prophet ﷺ said he's belittled the greatest of the favors of God. He's belittled the greatest of the favors of God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed you to be the carrier of His word. The carrier of His word. The carrier of His word, لو أنزلنا على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله. A mountain can't carry it. A mountain, if the Quran had been revealed to a mountain, the mountain couldn't bear the weight of the Quran. Yet your heart can carry it. Yet your heart can carry it. And it wasn't revealed to your heart. Only one heart could take that. Only one heart could take that. That's the purest of all hearts. The heart that had no dirt, no foulness, no filth. Yet with all the sins and all the wrong that we do, yet still our hearts, Allah has selected and chosen to be carriers of the Quran. If after that, you think that somebody else has got better than you, somebody else like dunya in his wealth and his job and his family and his whatever position and status and reputation he has, you think somebody's got better than you because even though you're hafiz of Quran, فَقَدْ صَغَّرَ أَعْظَمَ النِّعَمِ. That person's belittled the greatest of all of the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, أشراف أمتي حملة القرآن أصحاب الليل. حملة القرآن أصحاب الليل. أشراف أمتي, the most noblest of the people in my nation are the carriers of the Quran and the people who stand at night. The carriers of the Quran, the most noblest of the people, أشراف أمتي, the most noble of the people in my nation, حملة القرآن وأصحاب الليل. And our teacher, Shaykh Samar al-Nas, on one occasion when he explained this or spoke about this hadith, he said when people hear this hadith, often they only look at the first part. They don't look at the second part. Who are Ashraf al-Ummah? Who are the noblest ones in this nation? Hamalat al-Quran. The carriers of the Quran. Wa ashab al-layl. Not just the carriers of the Quran. And they're the ones who stand at night and read it. Wa ashab al-layl. Hamalat al-Quran by itself is a problem if that person's not reading Quran, particularly at night time. Hamalat al-Quran wa ashab al-layl. Both of them have to be there. For that person to be min ashraf al-ummah, from the noblest and the greatest of the nation of the Prophet not the honor is not just in the fact that Allah has placed the Quran in their hearts. The honor is that they recite the Quran, particularly at night. Particularly at night. As we've seen before, if Allah subhanahu places the Quran in your heart, He allows you to memorize it, and it's through permission from Him. You want to learn the Quran, you go and find a teacher who will teach you Quran, and then you start working to learn the Quran and you start to memorize that. All of that even came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who allowed you. It's His book. It's His book. It's His book. He preserves and He guards it through people that He chooses. That He chooses. So if you're now memorizing the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened up a door for you. But then now that you have that Quran, He now wants you to read it. He now wants you to read it. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a jealous Lord. And the jealousy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He will only give those gifts to those who are deserving of it. He only gives those gifts to those who are deserving of it. Ashab al-Layl. So once you're from Hamalat al-Quran, kunu min ashab al-Layl. You've now memorized the Quran or memorized portions of the Quran, then be from people who stand them and read it in the night. And then you've been selected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to memorize His words. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, أغنى الناس حملة القرآن. أغنى الناس حملة القرآن. The richest of all people are the memorizers of the Quran. The richest of all people are the memorizers of the Quran. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he also said, حامل القرآن موقى موقى من الوقاية. Those who carry the Quran are protected. As mentioned in the previous hadith, ما أكلته النار. Any ihab, any leather pouch, any heart that has the Quran within it, the fire will not touch that heart. And here the Prophet says, حامل القرآن موقى أي محفوظ من النار. The one who carries the Quran within his heart is protected, i.e. from hellfire. And then the honor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them, He chose them to carry the Quran, to preserve it, thereby being protected by it. He then honors them, and then He requires the believers to honor them. The Prophet ﷺ says, أكرموا حملة القرآن. أكرموا حملة القرآن. Honor the people of the Quran. Honor the carriers of the Quran. فمن أكرمهم فقد أكرمني ومن أكرمني فقد أكرم الله تعالى. So the Prophet ﷺ said, honor the carriers of the Quran, because whoever honors them has honored me, and whoever honors me has honored Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By showing that ikram to Ahl al-Quran, people of the Quran, when you honor them in how you deal with them and how you treat them and how you behave towards them, you're honoring the one to whom the Quran was revealed. You're honoring the one who revealed the Quran. You're honoring the one who's carrying the Quran. By honoring him, you're honoring the one to whom it was revealed, and you're honoring the one who revealed it. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, ألا فلا تنقصوا حملة القرآن حقوقهم فإنهم من الله بمكان. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, do not fall short in giving due rights to the people of the Quran, because they have a status with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فإنهم من الله بمكان. Then the Prophet ﷺ also spoke about the ranks of the people of the Quran by saying, حامل القرآن حامل راية الإسلام. حامل القرآن حامل راية الإسلام. The one who carries the Quran, those who memorize on a walk in the Quran, they are carrying the banner of Islam, the flag of Islam. Rayat al-Islam is the Quran. The banner, the flag that represents this religion is the Quran. So, حامل القرآن حامل راية الإسلام. The one who carries the Quran, who memorizes the Quran, is carrying the banner of Islam. من أكرمه فقد أكرم الله تعالى ومن أهانه فعليه لعنة الله. Whoever honors him, the person of Quran, has honored Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whoever disgraces him, may the curse of Allah be upon him. Whoever mistreats a person of Quran, فَعَلَيْهِ لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ. May the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon that person. So those ahadith that we read today are about memorization of the Quran. Memorization of the Quran. But the key thing to summarize and to close that discussion, the key thing with memorization of the Quran is Ashraf Ummati, Hamalat al-Quran, Ashab al-Layl. Memorizing the Quran to read, particularly at night time. Memorization of the Quran, your niyyah with memorizing the Quran is to recite the Quran. Your niyyah with memorization of the Quran is to recite the Quran. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. We're going to now move back to Surah Al-An'am, which we haven't touched for a couple of days. So we'll go back to Surah Al-An'am. Just to recap on Surah Al-An'am, just the key points that we spoke about Surah Al-An'am, and particularly for those who've not been present when we spoke about Surah Al-An'am. Surah Al-An'am is Surah number 6 in the Quran, and it's one of the 7 long chapters of the Quran that the Prophet ﷺ, he said was revealed in place of the Torah. The meanings of the revelation that came to Musa ﷺ to be found in the chapters beginning with Surah Al-Baqarah going up to Surah Al-Tawbah. So Surah Al-An'am is one of those surahs. Surah Al-An'am, the cattle or livestock, has a unique quality in that it's the longest part of the Quran that was revealed in one. As a general standard, 5 verses at a time is what Jibreel ﷺ would come to the Prophet ﷺ with. But here you have 165 verses, all together revealed, and in one narration it says one night. In one night, the whole of Surah Al-An'am was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, and it was revealed in Mecca. And the importance of being revealed in Mecca, and pretty much everything that comes in Mecca deals with Iman and Tawheed. It deals with faith. It deals with faith and belief. And Surah Al-An'am, for those who study Aqidah, you can relate to it a lot more, because Surah Al-An'am is more clearly about belief in God, belief in messengers, belief in the world to come. And that's the essence of what theology is about. Other parts, inshallah, if we get to Surah Al-A'raf, which is also revealed in Mecca, Surah Al-A'raf is essentially about the struggle between truth and falsehood. It's essentially about the struggle between truth and falsehood, and it speaks to the prophets in Mecca, going through the story of 7 prophets, like 6 prophets, beginning with Nuh and Hud and Salih and Lut and 6 prophets, and then a lengthy discussion about the struggle of Musa alayhi salam. And that's Surah Al-A'raf, a surah revealed in Mecca, but it's teaching the prophets through the stories of prophets, whereas Surah Al-An'am is more clear Tawheed. It's clear Tawheed. It's belief in Allah, belief in the messengers, and belief in the last day, in the world to come. We looked at some of the words, and as we mentioned, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he gave his explanation of words in the Quran. And it wasn't just Ibn Abbas. Many of the companions, they would do that, because the Quran was revealed in a language that they understood, but then it came with language beyond their usage of language. And part of the key aspects of preservation of the Quran was also hifd mufradat al-Quran, the vocabulary of the Quran. And for those, inshallah, who study Quran more extensively, more detail, you have one of the great dictionaries of the Quran, known as Mufradat al-Quran, that was written by the great scholar Ar-Raghib al-Asfahani. Mufradat al-Quran. So you almost have like a corpus of words that deal exclusively with words within the Quran. Whatever level of Arabic you get to, they were the masters of Arabic. But then there were still words in the Quran that needed clarification from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there's a level beyond everything. So you have this great work, which was by a later scholar known as Mufradat al-Quran, the vocabulary of the Quran, where he'll take you through words of the Quran and give you explanations of it in the context of the Quran. And that system began in the time of the companions. In the time of the companions, they were explaining words of the Quran. So we looked at a few of them. And that's how Imam al-Bukhari, because we're actually meant to be working through Sahih al-Bukhari, Kitab al-Tafsir, the book of exegesis or commentary of the Quran in Sahih al-Bukhari, and we're looking at Surah Al-An'am. And Surah Al-An'am, Imam al-Bukhari begins by explaining, I think, over 20 words in Surah Al-An'am. So he explained, ثُمَّ لَمْ تَكُنْ فِتْنَتُهُمْ. Then their fitna will be but to say. The word fitna normally means a tribulation or a problem, but in the context of Surah Al-An'am, it doesn't mean that. It means their contention or their excuse that they make on the Day of Judgment. So Ibn Abbas explained in that context. The word ma'rushat that comes in verse 141, we spoke about that. He gives an explanation of that. the verse after that 142, hamulatan wa farsha, that your animals, your livestock, they're hamula. Ibn Abbas explained that hamula is the animals that you carry loads upon, that you carry burden upon. Wa farsha, animals that are laid out and sacrificed. لِأُنذِرَكُمْ bihi. So then in verse 9, وَلَلَبَسْنَا, verse 9 in Surah Al-An'am, we obscured. I was speaking about how the confusion that the unbelievers in Mecca had. They were claiming that if he was truly from God, then why didn't God send angels? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, if you were angels, then we would have sent angels, but you're humans. And even as human beings, if we're going to send angels, we'll send them in human form. And then you'd still be confused about it. لِأُنذِرَكُمْ بِهِ. لِأُنذِرَكُمْ بِهِ. The fifth word that Imam al-Bukhari spoke about, that comes in verse 19, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to the Prophet and says that this Quran has been revealed unto me, that thereby I may warn you and whosoever it may reach. The you here being Ahl Makkah, that I may warn the people of Mecca and whoever it reaches. The sixth word, yan'awna. Yan'awna. The verb na'a yan'a, بمعنى بعد يبعد. ينأون يبعدون. They are distant. And we looked at the meaning of that in the context of the verse. To move on, the next word that Imam al-Bukhari speaks about, tubsala and ubsilu. Tubsala and ubsilu. And we're going to look at it in the context of the verse itself. So, verse 70 in Surah Al-An'am. Verse 70 in Surah Al-An'am, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to the unbelievers where he says, or speaks to the Prophet speaking about dealing with the unbelievers. And just to look before that, from verse 68 up to verse 70, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and more generally the believers, telling them that whenever you come across a people, يَخُوضُونَ فِي آيَاتِنَا, who is speaking aimlessly, ignorantly about our verses of Quran, don't sit with them. Don't sit in their presence. This is just taking a step back. Verse 68. وَإِذَا رَأَيْتَ الَّذِينَ يَخُوضُونَ فِي آيَاتِنَا فَأَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ حَتَّى يَخُوضُوا فِي حَدِيثٍ غَيْرِهِ. If you see some people sitting down and talking about the Quran, and talking about Allah, and talking about the Messenger, but they're speaking ignorantly about it, they're mocking it, they're condemning it, they're blaspheming against the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ. Turn away from them. Don't sit with them. Don't sit with them. And this was because, in the first instance, the mushrikun in Mecca, the unbelievers would sit around some of the Muslims. And as the Muslims would start speaking about the Quran, about the Prophet, they would start mocking and belittling and ridiculing the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them, don't sit with them. Don't sit with anybody who blasphemes against God, blasphemes against the Messenger, who blasphemes against the Quran. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِمَّا يُنْسِيَنَّكَ الشَّيْطَانُ فَلَا تَقْعُدْ بَعْدَ الذِّكْرَى مَعَ الْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. The only reason why you would sit with people who speak ill of Allah and His Messenger in the Quran is that shaitan has made you forget. And that's what the Quran says, وَإِمَّا يُنْسِيَنَّكَ الشَّيْطَانُ. If the shaitan makes you forget what? That if somebody's speaking ill of the revelation, of what God the Messenger, the revelation, that you don't sit in the presence of those people. Either you ask them to respect your faith and your belief. You ask them to stop speaking about, or leave. The Quran orders, أَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ, turn away from them. Don't sit in the presence of those who will ridicule and mock and belittle your faith. The only reason you do that is because shaitan has made you forget to leave at that point. And that's what verse 68 says, وَإِمَّا يُنْسِيَنَّكَ الشَّيْطَانِ. If the shaitan has made you forget, فَلَا تَقْعُدْ بَعْدَ الذِّكْرَى مَعَ الْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. Now that you've remembered that I shouldn't be sitting in the presence of people who are speaking ill against Allah and His Messenger in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't sit with them. Don't sit with such people. وَمَا عَلَى الَّذِينَ يَتَّقُونَ مِنْ حِسَابِهِمْ مِنْ شَيْءٍ وَلَكِنْ ذِكْرَى لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَّقُونَ. Then verse 69. What should you do with those people? They're sitting there speaking ill about your faith. What should you do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you have no responsibility towards them. You're not the one who's holding them to account. وَمَا عَلَى الَّذِينَ يَتَّقُونَ مِنْ حِسَابِهِمْ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. Their hisab is their hisab. you have nothing to do with how they will be questioned on the Day of Judgment for speaking against God and His Messenger. All that you're required to do, dhikra, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَّقُونَ. Just remind them that maybe they'll stop. Maybe they'll stop what they do. About these verses, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma said, أي قم إذا ذكرت النهي فلا تقعد مع المشركين. Ibn Abbas said about the previous verse 68, I leave, if you remember the prohibition, leave and don't sit with those people again. One of the Mufassirin, and especially in these times, there's a relevance to this, Ibn Atiyah. He says, ينبغي للمؤمن أن يمتثل حكم هذه الآية مع الملحدين وأهل الجدل والخوض فيه. He says that this verse, the believer should live and practice this verse if he's in the presence of malahida, al-mulhideen, those atheists who deny God and His Messenger, those who deny God and His Messenger, those who argue, dispute about God and His Messenger. So the believer should apply this verse and not remain in there. Either just tell them that they shouldn't speak about, respect your faith and not speak about it, or do not sit with them. Do not sit with them. So with malahida, who will mock atheists, deniers of God and His Messenger, who will mock and belittle and ridicule faith, which is more precious to the believer than his own life. His faith, the faith of believer is more precious to the believer than his own life. He will not remain with them. Rather, he will tell them either stop or he leaves. Then the verse goes on, speaking about those who would insult and blaspheme against God and His Messenger in Revelation. وَذَرِ الَّذِينَ اتَّخَذُوا دِينَهُمْ لَعِبًا وَلَهْوًا وَغَرَّتْهُمُ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا. Leave those people who treat their religion just as la'ib and lahu. Leave those people who treat their religion as play and diversion, and who are deluded by the life of this world, who give no weight to faith, who do not consider anything as being sacred anymore. Leave them. Leave them because they're enjoying their life. They've been fooled and deceived by the temporary nature of life, believing that there's nothing but this life. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَذَكِّرْ بِهِ أَن تُبْسَلَ نَفْسٌ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ. But remind them with the Quran, lest any soul be delivered to ruin because of what it has earned. Tubsala, that's the word that Imam al-Bukhari here is now explaining. Tubsala. Remind them lest any soul be delivered to ruin. Imam al-Bukhari, the term delivered to ruin, he says be disgraced. And disgraced here means on the Day of Judgment in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because what it has earned, it has no protector apart from God, nor any intercessor. And though it should offer every kind of ransom, it shall not be accepted from it. Those are the ones delivered to ruin. Ubsilu. The word ubsilu, delivered to ruin, Imam al-Bukhari explains it as meaning they were disgraced, or they will be disgraced on the Day of Judgment. Those are the ones delivered to ruin for that which they have earned. There shall be a drink of boiling liquid and a painful punishment for having disbelieved. That's the outcome for those who mock and belittle faith, belief in God, belief in the Messenger, belief in Revelation. We're told, leave them. Leave them, don't sit in their presence. They'll be delivered to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will they be disgraced in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the meaning of the word tubsala and ubsil. Then after that, the next word that Imam al-Bukhari explained comes in Surah Al-An'am, verse 93, speaking about the angel of death coming to those who claim that they have revelation along with the Messenger of God. False prophets, how they are dealt with at the point of their death, and how the angel of death will appear to them. We'll look at that tomorrow, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And inshallah, tomorrow we'll have the completed set of notes for Surah Al-An'am. Are there any questions on what we've covered today? Any questions? Yeah.
What would be the best way to get rid of an old Quran that's like ripped and in bad condition?
The best way, the easiest way, is to shred it into small pieces, and then dispose of it any way that you want. To shred it into small pieces where there's only parts of words that are left over. But that's only practical if it's just like a page or two. A whole Quran, the Hanafi ulama, they said the best thing to do is either place it in water until there's nothing that's left of it, or to bury it. But then they said even if you were to bury it somewhere away from where people would walk over. So even and there's a fascinating point with that. That even when you're disposing, or even when you get rid of the Quran by burying it such that it will be eaten by the soil and nothing be left of those pages. Even then, they said people shouldn't be walking over that part. Even though it's now beneath the ground, they said away from where people may walk over it. Allah. So they're the two ways that are mentioned. Based on the practice, Sayyidina Uthman, the Malikis, the view of Imam Malik is that it's allowed to burn. It's allowed to burn, but that's the view of Imam Malik alone. The majority said it cannot be burnt. It's either to be buried or to be placed in water. Allahu Akbar. Any other question? Dr. Sami, okay? Is this man still reading at home? We leave. Any questions of the sisters at the back? أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. وإلى حضرة النبي الفاتح. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على الفاتح. الرحمن الرحيم.